Hello everyone, thanks for joining me for another Tips Tuesday video. Today I'm inside and we're talking about customizing the buttons and dials on your camera. Now if you have the ability to do this, it's one of the things I really suggest you do so that you can adjust the settings, including exposure and autofocus and any other settings you might need to out in the field really quickly and efficiently so that you don't have to remove your eye from the viewfinder when you have a subject in front of you and the lighting or the situation is changing and you need to adjust things. So I'm going to run through the buttons that I have customized and the dials that I have customized and kind of why I have them the way I do and why it works for me. So let's get into it. If you're new to my channel, my name is Todd DeWald and I am a full-time wildlife and conservation photographer in New England. In this tip series, it is my goal to share with you some of the tips and techniques that I've developed over the years in the hopes that they will assist you in your photography journey. Consider subscribing to my channel to learn more, and thank you for watching. Now, depending on what camera you use and what brand you use, the ability to customize your camera is varied considerably. Basically, the rule of thumb is as you have kind of a more consumer grade camera and then move up to tiers, essentially more expensive cameras, up into the pro bodies, you have more customization as you go higher up in the tiers there. So it really depends on how much you're able to customize. And also some cameras allow only certain customization to certain buttons and dials. But I'm just going to run through what I have here. A lot of times cameras have buttons on the front where you have your kind of pointer fingers here, up here. So this camera body has 3 buttons up front. So I have those customized. And then you also have the buttons up top here along next to the shutter button that you can customize, as well as different buttons along the back of the camera as well. So I'm just going to run through the ones that I have customized, and we're just going to start with the buttons up front here. So up here we have the FN1, FN2, and FN3 buttons that are up here, and these are kind of activated by your pointer finger or middle finger. When you have your camera gripped, you're able to use your tips of your fingers here to adjust these buttons. And we're just going to start with the FN1 button up top. And I have that set so when I press that button, I have it set so it actually changes my autofocus mode. So typically I'm shooting in WC1 and WC2 autofocus modes, but when I press and hold this button here, it actually changes me into the 3D tracking autofocus mode. It's a mode that I use sometimes and is really helpful when I have a really erratic subject. So when I press and hold this button, the FN1 button, it activates that autofocus mode, so I don't have to dig into the dials and adjust camera focus modes that way. It just puts me right into that mode quickly and easily, and then when I activate the AF on button, I'll actually be able to engage autofocus that way. So that's the FN1 button. You can customize this to pretty much any autofocus mode that you wanted to. I have it set to 3D tracking mode because it is a useful mode in certain situations. Now FN2, I have that one set similar to FN1, but FN2 I have it set to an autofocus mode of WC2. So typically I have my WC1 autofocus box. You can adjust the size of the autofocus box, and I have it set to the smallest, basically single point autofocus box. And my WC2 box is typically a larger box, a larger area box. So if I'm say a subject is moving closer to me or it's suddenly in a different scene and you're able to use a larger box to capture it, I can easily switch and just press and hold the FN2 button. It switches me to the WC2 mode, and then I'm able to engage the AF on, and it'll focus using that mode really quickly instead of having to adjust the buttons and dials to change the autofocus mode. Now, since we're up front, FN3 is the button when you have this in vertical grip. So that one is actually press and hold that, and then you're able to adjust the autofocus modes by turning the rear dial here. So you're able to adjust autofocus modes that way. And then if you adjust using the front dial, you're able to adjust the autofocus mode. So you can change from AFC to AFS, AFF, whichever mode you want that way. When things are changing quickly and I don't want to have to press a button and a dial, I can just quickly press just a button and change the autofocus mode that way. So it basically gives me 3 autofocus modes at the tips of my fingers. So whatever I have in my camera set already would be the one, which is typically WC1. Then when I do my top button, the FN1 button, I go right into 3D tracking mode that way, which has eye detect that way. And then when I do the FN2 button, I'm right into WC2 autofocus mode. So it really gives me 3 autofocus modes really quickly. And it just works really well. I don't have to change too many settings, and I can just press which finger I want, and that gives me the autofocus mode that I want. Now I also have another button customized to change the autofocus modes, and that is actually in photo mode. I have the record button up top here to adjust autofocus modes as well. Now this one you press, I have it set to press and hold, and then you use the rear dial to adjust the autofocus area mode. So I can then scroll through all of my autofocus area modes. So say the WC1, the 3D tracking, or WC2 isn't working, and maybe I need a single point without eye tracking. So it's something I use for shortboards a lot because they blend in so well to their environment. And I need to get to that setting. I can just press and hold the record button and then switch the dial, and it'll change which autofocus area mode I'm in that way. And then again with the front dial, I can adjust the AFC to AFS mode. I typically just always have it in AFC mode. So those are the buttons that I use to change my autofocus mode, area mode. It's really useful, and it really makes it so you don't have to remove your eye from the viewfinder. You don't have to dig into the settings of the camera. Just 3 buttons, easily customized, that you can then just really go through your autofocus modes that you use, and it really works well. Obviously, you don't need to have the autofocus area modes that I use. Whatever autofocus modes that you commonly use, it might be good to set them to easily usable buttons. That way you can just easily access them without having to scroll through a whole bunch. Now then up top, I have the ISO button. That is still set to ISO. You can press and hold that and then scroll through the back dial. I have it set for back dial because it's just a lot easier. My front finger is already kind of used here, so if I have it and then press and hold, I can use the back thumb to just change the autofocus, the ISO that way. I typically set it to manual ISO, but if you're using auto ISO, you don't really have to worry about that too much. And then the back, so I have it set so that I use the AF on back button autofocus button. I use that for all of my autofocus needs. That way I basically have continuous autofocus when I press and hold the AF on button, and then when I release it, I am essentially in single autofocus. So it gives me both of those modes in one, and it's really useful that way. Obviously, up on this camera, we can switch from the camera to video really quick and easily, which I use a lot. The joystick I have customized to be able to move the autofocus box. And then I also have the autofocus box to be able to move with the OK dial here. You can easily scroll through and change that. I have it set to both because that's basically all I really need it for. And then I have the OK button to return the autofocus box up into the center of the screen, up into the viewfinder. I find it's really useful to have that because sometimes your autofocus box kind of gets lost in the corner and you really need to just quickly bring it back up in the center and adjust it that way. You can really easily do that. And then that's basically all I have for the customization on the camera here. All the buttons on the bottom, the quality and the white balance button, I keep them to the image quality and the white balance. You have a lot of the frame rate buttons up here on the dials. So the benefits of this camera body here are there's so many buttons that they just make sense how they're customized already. The ones that I really wanted to customize were the ones that pertain to autofocus. So I have the buttons up front, which are really useful for that. And then I have the back dial set for my shutter speed. When I change that, it adjusts my shutter speed, and then the front dial adjusts the aperture. So I'm really able to adjust my exposure really quickly. And then autofocus is really quick and easy to adjust as well. Really allows me to adjust things quickly in the field. I can keep my camera up at my eye, looking through the viewfinder, and press and do what I need to without having to remove and look at my screen to see where I'm at. Another thing you can customize on some camera bodies, I know on Canon you can as well, you can customize the kind of internal menu, so the quick menu, which is the I button on this camera body. You can go in and you can kind of have a set of a couple different settings you can kind of dig a little deeper in and adjust. So what I have in my photo mode is I have kind of on my right side, I can adjust the autofocus mode, so from AFC to AFS. I can change the autofocusing tracking with lock-on speed, which is something I really like having in my quick menu, because depending on the subject you're trying to photograph, you might want to change the speed of tracking and quickness of tracking for lock-on, depending on what you're shooting. I also have it so you can look and adjust the autofocus area mode in that menu as well if you need to. Not something I typically do, but I like having it there as well. I also have the ability to change the peaking intensity, so focus peaking, which is something I tend to adjust depending on the situation. I use manual focus a lot, especially for video, and this is a setting I like to have really quick and easy to adjust. I can adjust the intensity, I can adjust the color. I also have the changing the image area. I typically shoot in photo in just the full frame, the FX mode, but in video a lot, I have actually that button customized to change from full frame to crop mode. And then you can see the other options here, which is image quality, metering, vibration reduction. And then I also have the custom control shooting bank option on this menu, because if for some reason I'm shooting and one button I want to customize for a certain different setting, I can just quickly go in here and adjust the settings on the buttons for the cameras really quickly, so that I can adjust that and make that really simple. So that's my information button, the quick menu. And then for video, I have things customized pretty much the same, because I like being able to have the buttons the same in photo and video, so I can easily go about the settings and not have to think about, oh, I'm in video mode now, I need to adjust these things. So in video, the only thing that's really different is the fact that the record button is now obviously set to record and start recording video. So in that case, I actually have the FN1 button set to adjust the autofocus area mode box. So when I press and hold the FN1 button, I can then use the back dial and adjust and scroll through the AF area modes. Everything else is set the same. I have my eye menu set to pretty much the same thing, so everything's in a similar location. The only thing on this one is I have the frame rate option in there as well, because I commonly go through and adjust the frame rates for my videos from slow motion to standard motion. So I have this in there so I can quickly adjust that. The FN2 button up front, I mentioned this earlier, how I said that I had the full frame and crop mode options set to a button, and I have that set to FN2. For video work, I find a lot I do use crop mode. The quality of the sensor and the amount of pixels in the sensor allow you to have 4K video even in crop mode, so the quality is fantastic. So I commonly use crop mode depending on the situation. So I have FN2 set to adjust between full frame and crop mode for video. Now, obviously, the way I have my camera customized is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's just things that work for me, things that I've noticed that I commonly want to switch to and adjust. I have those customized. So if you typically change a different setting in your camera and you want that easily accessible, then maybe you want to customize a button for that. The thing that I would suggest is just when you're out in the field, think about and start to recognize the things you need to adjust, and maybe you can customize your camera so that you can quickly adjust that how you need to. So that's going to be it for me in this Tips Tuesday. I hope the way that I have my camera customized might assist you in giving you some ideas on how you can customize your camera. But again, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Think about what you need and what you need to adjust in your camera, and then see if you can get your camera customized that way. So that'll be it for this Tips Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next week.